What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we're going to tie up some loose ends. Last week we did a free agency winner and loser video where we talked through all the running back signings, the musical chairs that happened. But since then, we've had Marquise Brown to the Chiefs, Curtis Samuel to the Bills. We've had Calvin Ridley sign, I think, like the biggest contract we've seen in free agency. You have Justin Fields getting traded. So this is pretty much a part two of our winners and losers. We're going to go through 5 players skyrocketing up my Dynasty rankings after free agency. And then we'll talk through a couple of fallers as well. So with all that being said, if you enjoy, make sure to get down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen. She gonna let me.
All right, now I do want to say before we get into the players here, the whole point of this video is I just did a massive Dynasty rankings update. So it's all updated for post-NFL free agency, another update to the rookie rankings as well. So the rookie rankings, Dynasty rankings are all on there, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You can find that in the description or the comment section down below. And what that brings us to is this. We have Marquise Brown as our first player skyrocketing up my Dynasty rankings, right? So he was my 906 as my wide receiver 47. He's now my 712 as my wide receiver 39. So that's 8 wide receiver spots and about a round and a half of startup value gained with Marquise Brown. I think that that's going to be easy to follow for you guys. Again, this is just what my Dynasty rankings were in February versus what they are now in March. So with Marquise Brown, it's pretty clear what happened. He went from being a free agent where it was weird. He was like slept on for a second where you have the Calvin Ridley signing happened. You had Mike Evans re-sign. You had Gabe Davis get signed. And like Marquise Brown was just kind of hanging around of like, what's he going to do? I personally thought he was going to re-sign with the Cardinals, but he goes out here. He signs with the Chiefs. Now, important to know because we're talking through a Dynasty lens here, though I will say it's Dynasty, but then also just overall fantasy football. It's a 1-year deal. A 1-year deal, almost like I don't know if I would call it a prove-it deal because Marquise Brown's a known commodity, but it really is a 1-year deal to then go get his big payday next offseason, whether that be with the Chiefs or with somebody else. It is I think it's like about $10 million for the year. Now, I love him for all the reasons. He was actually, I will say, pat on the back. We had him as a buy in our buy and sell video from like 3 weeks ago. So if you went out there and you bought Marquise Brown, you've already profited. Now, the reason why I was saying that he was a buy is because last year, until like week 12, he was actually pretty good. Where you can see after week 12, he had only like 56% of the snaps and 32% of the snaps. He was dealing with a sore heel is what it was. But before that, he was kind of balling out, right? 14.8 points against the Rams, 15.3 against the Ravens. Through the first 5 weeks, he had 4 top 24 finishes in his first 5 games this past season. He was kind of cooking with Josh Dobbs. Now, you have to remember, he had Josh Dobbs, then he had Clayton Tune for a game after they traded Josh Dobbs, then he had Kyler Murray coming off of an ACL tear. That's tough to make it work with 3 different quarterbacks and also deal with an injury down the stretch. So that's why his 2023 numbers weren't all that good. But when we look at what he did on a per-out basis, it's still pretty strong. His 2023, if we just look weeks 1 through 12, right, that's when he was actually healthy and on the field. He was the wide receiver 18 in expected points per game. So that's just based on your targets, your volume, your red zone targets. How many points should you be putting up? He should have been around wide receiver 18 as like a top 24 guy, back to his form from like 2021 to 2022. His actual output, just 11.2 points per game, wide receiver 40. Again, not the best passing offense, the one that he was in with the Cardinals. Now, we talked about it again on the buys and sells. He's not going to be somebody that is a league winner and finishes as a top 5 point per game wide receiver, right? He's going to be next to Travis Kelce. He's going to be next to Rashee Rice. But this is somebody that for a 7th or 8th round pick in startups, you can get, and he can be a top 24 producer, and that is impactful, right? That's something I'm trying to think of like that was Michael Pittman, but in redraft leagues. Last year, Michael Pittman was a guy you could get pretty much 8th round because nobody knew what the Colts quarterback situation was going to be, right? Anthony Richardson doesn't really pass the ball a ton. He's more of a scrambling QB, and he ends up finishing as a top 24 guy. And I wouldn't call him a league winner, but he had a huge impact on your team, and that's what I think Marquise Brown can be. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that going from the Cardinals and before that the Ravens is going to be a massive upgrade going to Patrick Mahomes, but I don't think you really understand how big of an upgrade it is until you see it on paper. He goes from his Ravens stint, 2019 to 2021, 29.7 pass attempts per game. 2022 to 2023 with the Cardinals, 35.9. And Patrick Mahomes' career average pass attempts per game, 37.4. So he'll have more volume. And then passing yards per game was right in that 215 range with the Cardinals and the Ravens. During the Patrick Mahomes era, the Chiefs have averaged 296.2 passing yards per game. He'll have more volume. He'll have more yards. And then on top of that, he'll have more efficiency with more touchdowns. Mahomes averages 2.3 passing touchdowns per game to Baltimore's 1.73 during those years. That was, again, during a Lamar Jackson MVP campaign, and then with the Cardinals 1.03. So he's going to have more volume, more yards, more touchdowns. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful thing. Again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that Patrick Mahomes is a good quarterback, but after a down year last year, I think we forget, like, those are, for career averages, those are bonkers stats. Those are top 5 numbers in any given year, let alone a career average year in and year out. Yes, he had a down year last year, but I think it was clear they don't want to win games like they did last year, where they're like relying on Kadarius Toney and Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Justin Watson. I think, to me, it's pretty clear that Mahomes is somebody that likes scoring the ball. Same thing with Andy Reid, and last year they just did it out of necessity, whereas we have another 5-year sample of Mahomes lighting the NFL up, and Marquise Brown could be a part of that as really their only reliable deep threat. He can kind of squeeze into that Marquez Valdes-Scantling role, where you have not Tyreek, you had Kelsey and Rice. Kelsey's ADOT was 7 yards. Rashee Rice's ADOT was 5. Marquise Brown's career ADOT is 12.6. So you finally get somebody that can actually get open, create separation, be reliable downfield, and that should be really exciting because Mahomes hasn't had a reliable option downfield. I mean, MVS has come up in big moments, but a true 1,000-yard receiver in that role since Tyreek Hill. Now, our second player who is skyrocketing up my Dynasty rankings is a fun one, man. I really miss the days where Curtis Samuel was relevant. He's just had, he has had, we talk all the time about like DJ Moore's early career. Who else? Like Allen Robinson's one, right? Where like Christian Hackenberg to like Mitch Trubisky to just like a shit show of career quarterbacks. Blake Bortles as well with Allen Robinson. Curtis Samuel's in that same boat, man. He had Sam Howell. Before that, Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, Teddy Bridgewater, Kyle Allen, and then a washed-up Cam Newton for like his final year or two in Carolina. Just awful quarterback play for his entire career. Now, he goes to the Bills on a 3-year, $24 million deal. First year is fully guaranteed, and $5 million of his 2025 salary is also guaranteed. Seems to be at least a 2-year commitment for the Bills at minimum. That is exciting. That is 2 years of him playing with by far the best quarterback of his career in Josh Allen at the peak of his powers. That moved him, for me, from my 1803 as my wide receiver 79 to my 1208 as my wide receiver 58. So that is 21 wide receiver spots and like 5.5 rounds of value, because him going to a good offense, an explosive offense, is absolutely massive. Now, there's some things that we have to take into account here with Curtis Samuel. His best year, his only ever top 30 point per game finish, 14.1 points per game in 2020, came with his only year under Joe Brady. Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator for the Panthers in 2020. Curtis Samuel had a career year that year where he had 97 targets, 77 catches, 851 yards, 3 touchdowns. He added a bunch on the ground as well. He's one of these dynamic playmakers where he takes carries. He does it all. He's a very, very fun player. And on top of that, he's a good wide receiver. Shout out to Matt Harmon. We're going to have him on here at the, I think probably around draft time to talk through the wide receivers, but he is the premier source. Make sure you check out Reception Perception. It's a great website. He has these up for all the free agent wide receivers. Calvin Ridley, Gabe Davis, everybody, Marquise Brown as well. Anybody you want to know about in this free agency class, he has charted them all. And he tweeted out, Curtis Samuel in 2023 on Washington had a 82nd percentile success rate versus man coverage. He's cleared 75% success rate versus man in all 4 seasons that he's been charted for Reception Perception, and an 80% success rate versus zone this year was the best mark of his career. Samuel is a position versatile wide receiver who can win in multiple roles and separate, perfect fit for what the Bills have been missing, full profile. So he's very exciting. He can win downfield. He can win in the intermediate areas. He can take handoffs. He just hasn't really been in good offenses his entire career. And on top of like being a great wide receiver, we talked about him taking handoffs. You get fantasy points for those as well, right? So since Curtis Samuel got drafted in 2017, he's behind just Deebo Samuel among wide receivers in rushing yards. He has 715 rushing yards during, what is that, like a 6-year span. So he's going to add on the ground. He's dynamic on the ground as well. This is a tweet from Ian Harditz where Deebo Samuel has 6.3 yards per carry. Curtis Samuel has 5.9. First and second among all 9 non-quarterbacks with 103 or more rush attempts since 2017. So he's this dynamic playmaker. He can win everywhere. He can just be a really nice, fun addition to this offense, and he has history with Joe Brady. So to me, he deserves a sizable bump. Now, of course, we're still talking about the wide receiver 58. So, yes, it's a pretty huge bump, but relative to late rounds, he's still a double-digit round pick for me as someone you can rely on as like a wide receiver 3 in Dynasty with some upside. Definitely somebody fun where if you have like Josh Allen, you can cheaply acquire Curtis Samuel to just, make a nice little stack, and you don't have the funds to pay up for Stephon Diggs or Kincaid. I think it's a fun option in deeper leagues where it's like start 10, start 11. So, after that, we have 3 and 4, the tandem backfield, Zamir White and Alexander Mattison. We had a running back carousel happen in this backfield where you have Josh Jacobs going to the Packers, and then you have Alexander Mattison signing with the Raiders. So that means you bump up both, right? Zamir White, I moved him from my 1410 as my RB45 to my 1307 as my RB38. So like about a round and some change, 7 RB spots. Alexander Mattison, barely an upgrade, RB68 to RB62, about a round of improvement, but that's really just because he's on an NFL roster, whereas before, a couple days ago, he was not on an NFL roster. That's really all it comes down to for Alexander Mattison. Now, with Zamir White, it's interesting. No Josh Jacobs. Alexander Mattison comes in, but it's pretty clear that with Alexander Mattison coming in, Zamir White is now the RB1 on a team that wants to run the ball with Antonio Pierce, whereas when it was Josh Jacobs, he was more of like your handcuff. Now, when we talk about Zamir White, he was pretty good down the stretch, right? From that week 15 on, Josh Jacobs didn't play or he played sparingly, and you got an RB12 finish, an RB17 finish, RB16, RB20, 20 or more carries in 3 of those games. Still, again, the volume is great, right? Don't get me wrong, the volume is great, but with 20 or more carries in 3 straight games and none of them he was a top 12 running back on the week is a bit concerning for me. Now, he did catch some passes in those games. I think one of them he had 6 targets. It's tough. He's not spectacular to me. He's your very traditional replacement level running back, right? Same guys you can get with Chuba Hubbard or a Jerome Ford type of guy. They're all very similar bets as Zamir White, but he is now getting pushed up because it's very clear that he's at the top of his depth chart, and you're going to have people do their projections for the year, and they're going to push him up in redraft. He's going to become essentially a dead zone running back. We see it every single year. It's a bit of a different equation in Dynasty, but I do just get nervous paying up for replaceable production. I would very much rather, if I could net, if I could do Zamir White for Chuba Hubbard in an early second this year, I think I would. This isn't a sell video. I'm moving up Zamir White, but I am just saying I would be cautious, all of a sudden, going all in on Zamir White or wanting to trade for him or trust him in any capacity. I don't know. We just see a lot of times guys who are replacement level producers, they get thrusted into a role, and then it just either doesn't work out or they're just fine, and there's not a lot of profit to be had. Zamir White is a league winner in a year where Josh Jacobs goes down in week 4 and he doesn't come back until never that year, and then Zamir White's your guy from week 5 on, and you drafted him in the 15th round. But now he's going to be a 7th or 8th round pick, and he's going to have Alexander Mattison, and then you're also going to have potentially on draft day they could draft somebody. They could draft a Blake Corum, they could draft an Audric Estime, a Braylon Allen, they could draft Trey Benson, Ray Davis. There's a lot of guys they could bring in that certainly would kind of mess things up. So for now, all you can really project him is, one of your replacement level 15 point per game guys that as the season goes on, your league mates are going to be able to sort of replicate Zamir White's production from the waiver wire. Now, I will say, you can certainly say it's a good scenario because they signed Alexander Mattison and they didn't sign a Swift or an Eckler or a Saquon or an Aaron Jones. So that's good for him. I would call it a win, and it's why we're moving him up. I would just be a little bit cautious. I will throw these numbers in here. Alexander Mattison outside the top 30 running backs, missed tackles forced per attempt or touch, yards after contact per attempt, explosive run percentage, PFF rush grade, rushing yards over expected per attempt. Zamir White, not so great either, but he is at least 10th in yards after contact per attempt and 14th in rushing yards over expected per attempt. Just a nice high floor runner. He's going to, lower his shoulder, get some yards after contact. He'll get what's blocked for him, but in terms of explosive plays and breakaway ability, it's not really there. Now, after that, again, I didn't mean to be so negative with the Zamir White breakdown. You can see I moved him up, but I think I'm going to move him up less comparatively to the market is all I'm really trying to say. After that, we have Marvin Mims. We moved him up just a little bit because we had Jerry Jeudy traded to the Browns and then signed a 3-year contract, which, I mean, good on them, man. I don't know that I would pay $41 million guaranteed for Jerry Jeudy when it feels like it's kind of a prove-it trade deal where he plays for a year and you go from there, but who knows? I will say I'm excited. All those Alabama guys like Calvin Ridley and Jeudy, they look up to Amari Cooper. Him playing next to Amari Cooper will probably be good for him, but I don't know what that's really going to do for his fantasy purposes. But I moved Marvin Mims from my wide receiver 68 as my 1404 to my 1212 as my wide receiver 62. So 6 wide receiver spots in about like a round and a half of startup value. Jerry Jeudy's gone. That's going to open up routes for Marvin Mims. I wouldn't get carried away, but it is exciting. Marvin Mims was, a second-round draft pick last year, but he ended up being 19th in total routes run, just 245 routes run. And because of that, or that was because Jerry Jeudy was in the mix, running a lot of routes, stealing all of those routes. It was a crowded wide receiver room. Now, we have a Matthew Berry article, which I always love. He does these at the Combine. They're always fun. I believe it's an article called Matthew Berry's 25 Most Interesting Things He Heard at the Combine. This was number 23. I wasn't there for this again, so credit to my guys at Roster Watch, but thank you to whoever asked Sean Payton, how do you explain the utilization of Marvin Mims, your first draft pick as a Denver Bronco, and can you compare him to the like of Brandon Cooks, who you drafted with your first Saints pick? Payton's answer: without making a comparison first, I'd say with Mims, we saw him flourish as a returner, and I really think the only thing that really stopped his progress as a receiver was us, and trying to find roles. He's playing the same position as Jerry Jeudy, and so I've said that a number of times. I think you're going to see a lot of growth with this player. He's tough. He can run. We're certainly excited we have him, but I think the key is for us, and I say us as coaches, game planning, evolving, and every time we've kind of put his name on a certain play, he hasn't disappointed. That doesn't mean the ball always went to him, but the point I'm making is I think his progress was hampered a little bit more with the depth in the room and what we were able to do, and sometimes trying to balance that out. I think we'll see that expand. In other words, if Jerry Jeudy leaves, Mims will get his shot. If not, sigh. So it's some fluff. I don't like to buy into narratives like that all the time, especially, like Quentin Johnston's going to get talked up as like, oh, in year 2, he's going to be fine. But there's some validity to that. He does have overlapping skill sets with Jerry Jeudy. He's also one of these like vertical slot type of guys. Mims is a very similar role to that. And he had such a weird year that it makes me more optimistic than your usual Denzel Mims, KJ Hamler, Terrace Marshall type of face planner. Those first 4 weeks, I just can't shake him, man. 91.4 receiving grade, 80.7, 78.3. He had 113 yards, 73 yards, 47 yards in his first, 3 or 4 games. He looked really good early on, and then just something happened there. I really couldn't tell you why that is, but I think it's at least more appealing than if this was just to be the entire thing down the board of like 60s and 70s. There's at least some flashes there that we can kind of hope that he can rekindle in this next year. The opportunity should be there. So I'll bump up Marvin Mims just a little bit because of that. Now, moving on from that, that's 5 players skyrocketing up my rankings, but I did want to talk about some fallers here. We have about 3 players to talk about that are falling down my rankings as well. First up, we have Keenan Allen. He moved down 13 spots from the wide receiver 36 down to the wide receiver 49. I moved him from the 801 to the 909. So about 2 rounds of startup value lost, about 13 spots, wide receiver spots lost. And for me, it's pretty simple. He goes from the Chargers to the Bears. He's had Justin Herbert since 2020, and during that time with Justin Herbert, he has been the wide receiver 7 in points per game. I don't really think it's that crazy after he came off a career best 21.5 points a game with Justin Herbert to then downgrade him with whatever rookie QB the Bears take. They'll probably take Caleb Williams, but it's tough. Environment is going to really matter for a 32-year-old wide receiver. We want production now, and having a rookie quarterback definitely hampers that, where Justin Herbert is a top 10 quarterback at worst. Can Caleb Williams be C.J. Stroud, and how C.J. Stroud carried Nico Collins and Tank Dell? Can Caleb Williams do that with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore? Maybe, but like more likely than not, that's not how it goes. Right? We saw Bryce Young last year and the years before that. It's pretty rare to see a rookie quarterback come in and support multiple really good wide receivers. We'll see if that can happen. DJ Moore's a legit stud in his own right, so Keenan Allen goes from somebody on the Chargers who has top 5 point per game upside to now with the Bears probably more like top 12, and the floor is lower. So just not as sexy as he was before. And you have to move him down just based on what this offense is going to look like with the rookie quarterback competing next to a legit receiver in DJ Moore. Now, our 6th player here, right? It actually might be our 7th. I don't know. I'm losing count. But we have DeAndre Hopkins. He moved down for me. It's a really, really similar story. He moved down from my 1108 as my wide receiver 49 to my 1209 as my wide receiver 59. So 10 wide receiver spots, about a round of startup value. And the thing is, they signed Calvin Ridley. $92 million deal, $50 million guaranteed. It's a wild, I think you can fact check me on this. I think that it's like the most guaranteed money in a free agent wide receiver signing, not one where a player hits the open market, right? Like Tyreek Hill was traded. I think Devontae Adams was traded. So one where a guy hits the open market and gets signed, massive, massive deal there. And the issue is that D-Hop, his appeal at this age is just being a target earner, just being like the most alpha of alpha target earners. Last year, he was top 10 in target share at about 27%. His target per route run numbers is like really good. 29% target per route run is right up there with Puka and A.J. Brown and all of these top wide receivers. So he goes from being like the clear number one on what should be a pass-friendly offense to now being, 1A, 1B with Calvin Ridley, which definitely does put a damper on things. Now, I will say, this offense should be better for fantasy football, and that's exciting. They bring in the Bengals offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan. He is coming from an offense where during his time with the Bengals was 3rd in neutral pass rate. The Titans were dead last. I'm not saying that they're going to be top 3 in pass rate, the Titans, but I'm saying they're going to probably be more league average than they're going to be bottom 3. So that's exciting. It should be a pass-friendly offense. You have an exciting but unproven quarterback in Will Levis, so it's just tough to really project DeAndre Hopkins being a real difference maker in this environment now next to a Calvin Ridley. But I will say, he is still talented. Calvin really didn't look all that great last year, right? When we look at ESPN tracking data, he had an 82 open score. So just how good he was at creating separation and getting open. Best number since 2019 for him when he was squarely in his prime. So I think he's still got juice. I think he's still a good player. But again, he goes from the unquestioned number one in what's going to be an offense that improves to now splitting, the chips up with Calvin Ridley at the top. And Calvin Ridley gets a bump down there as well, not nearly as steep as DeAndre Hopkins, who's much older, and you kind of need it now or never when it comes to production for him. And then our last player here we're going to talk through, Justin Fields. This one's on me, all right? He goes to the Steelers. He gets traded to the Steelers for a 6th-round pick that could be a 4th based on playing time. He was my 401. He's now my 808. I moved him down 6 quarterback spots and 4 rounds of startup value. There's nothing else I can say besides this one's on me. I wish I thought, and I think the entire fantasy community did this because his ADP was like 3rd, 4th round, but I really do think the minute that the Bears got the 1st overall pick and it was clear that Justin Fields wasn't going to be their starter, that we should have started moving him down just in case this was the scenario, right? I was very optimistic. I thought the Raiders, I thought the Falcons, I thought the Broncos, I thought the Vikings, I thought one of them could make a trade and, he goes to a spot where he can start week 1 and it's, no harm, no foul. That's fine. We've been playing like this with Justin Fields for a little bit here, where as long as he starts in week 1, he's going to score points, and you can worry about his long-term starter upside later on down the line. Not the case. He goes to the Steelers. They also have Russell Wilson. I will say he's not going to be the week 1 starter here, but I don't think it's a Trey Lance situation where he's just like banished to the bench forever. Russell Wilson, he's not Dak. The Broncos are eating $50 million in 2024 and $30 million in 2025 just to have him not on the team. So Russell Wilson's stats were kind of misleading last year. He was pretty comfortably like a bottom 10 starter in the NFL. I think that Russell play for a stretch. He'll get the first crack at it, and then we could see Justin Fields come in around, week 7, 8, 9, 10, whenever that may be, and he goes back to scoring points. Because the thing is with Justin Fields is at least we know from the sample size we have, the minute he steps on the field, he scores fantasy points. Over his last 2 seasons, with 28 games started, he is the QB6 in points per game. The minute he steps on the field, you are getting top 6 fantasy point production, and that is huge. So the way that I look at it, and the reason why I still have him as my 808, I think that consensus will probably have him further back than that, is once you get to the 8th, 9th, 10th round, you're looking around at similarly poor bets, really. There's a lot worse things you can do than take a gamble on a quarterback that scores points like this, because the minute he starts, you'll have plenty of opportunities to sell, right? The minute he goes out there, like versus the Ravens, puts up like 20 points, because he's going to have, that's Justin Fields. Is he like the most consistent starter of all time? No. But is he, you know, Lamar Jackson, Michael Vick, is he up there with those guys as one of the best rushing quarterbacks we've ever seen? Yeah. So the minute that he does some crazy stuff and he puts it on SportsCenter, hype will come back up. You can either cash out for a first when that happens, or the value gain is already there where you can just start him in your super flex spot. And for a guy that you got for cheap, whether you acquired him with like a second round pick or you drafted him in like the 8th, 9th, 10th round of a startup this offseason, you put him into your super flex spot. Top 6 quarterback production is like massive value over replacement, wins above replacement type of value. So you can get, you know, if it doesn't really seem like there's a ton of upside for him to be a long-term starter, then you're not getting value there. But the minute he steps on the field, you're getting value there with him in your lineup, or you can trade him to somebody else who needs to fill a need with Justin Fields as their quarterback. So that's why you got to move him down. But I think that 808 will be higher than others when it comes to Justin Fields. Now, again, that's going to do it for us today. If you want to see the entire Dynasty rankings update, I have my top 250 Dynasty rankings. I have my top 45 rookie rankings with RS grades attached. You get everything you could possibly imagine on Patreon. Patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You can find it down below in the description. In the comment section down below, my top 250 Dynasty rankings, my rookie rankings, my RS grades dating back to 2007, Patreon leagues, trade advices on Patreon, and like the higher tiers. On top of that, you get my buys and sells, where I have each position broken down, players I would buy, sell, neutral on. So across the board, it's a great utility. It's only like, I think, $8 a month. So make sure to check it out, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. But if not, I appreciate you just sticking around watching the video. It's March. Not a dead period per se, but if you're watching these videos, you are truly a real one. So just leave a like, subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze. I used